You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have two amazing guests. They met in 1987 on the U.S. National Tour 4 of Cats, and they are now married. She was on tour as Syllabub, and he was working on the tour at the same time, and then has continued his Cats journey as well. So I'm excited to have another Cats couple here. Welcome, Kevin and Leslie Harvey, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I always love hearing the couples that kind of form on tour, but usually I start from the lens of what characters were they and should those characters be a couple or not. And so I kind of like the idea of here is that you were Syllabub and you weren't on the tour in terms of like you weren't Tugger, because it seems to be a lot of Tugger marriages. Tugger seems to be always one of the two, but you were working on the tour. But before we get into your connection and meeting on tour and that U.S. Tour 4, I always have to start with the beginning, your history of Cats. When was the first time you saw it? Because you predate this 1998 movie.
Oh, yeah. Les, I'll leave it to you.
I'm actually trying to think when was the first time I saw it. I think I heard the auditions were coming to Chicago, and I knew someone in the cast, and he told me there's a part that's perfect for you. So I went to see the show.
That was the second national, just for...
Okay.
The second national company.
That was in Chicago.
That was in Chicago.
So I went to see the show, and I think that must have been it. So it must have been like 1987.
And so you went and saw it. So you saw the second national in Chicago. What was your reaction the first time you saw it?
Well, I loved it because being a dancer, I was so attracted to the dance part of it. I'm not so sure that I understood any story whatsoever, but I just was visually so stimulated by costumes, the wigs, the dancing, the music. I just loved all of it.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, what about you?
So when I first became aware of it, my dad was working on at Broadway in the early 80s when I became aware of it. He was a Broadway stage manager, and he had talked about it. A friend of mine saw it in Los Angeles where I was living at the time and said, it's just this amazing show. You got to see it. It's unbelievable. And you have to remember that back in then, 1984, 1885, it's still 2 years after it opened in London, or 3 years after it opened in London, it was groundbreaking. It was so different than anything anybody ever seen. So anyway, I had heard about it. I had never seen it. And when I got the job to actually, do the merchandise on the bus and truck, when I was working as a PA on Broadway, I had not seen it. So I didn't see it until I saw Leslie perform it, in the company that I joined. That was the first time I saw the show. Yeah.
Okay, so you get this. You basically you're working on Broadway as a PA, and you get the job to go sell merch, and you're selling merch, and then you're seeing the show in the back, in the back of the house, kind of as you're selling.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how much you want to veer off your path, but the interesting part about Leslie and I is because I was selling merch, I was a young 20-something guy. I was with my good friend Todd Walton, who was, he and I had grown up together. The first thing we did when we got the new programs to get ready to sell for the first show is we opened up all the inserts to check out the girls in the show. And as we went through the girls in the show, I picked out Leslie's picture and I said, I'm going to marry that one. And just coincidentally, it worked.
Okay. When did you learn that, Leslie? How did this all unfold from your perspective?
Well, it's kind of funny. Really, before the show even opened, we were in New Haven, Connecticut, and we were doing our dress rehearsals. And Todd and Kevin were out in the lobby, and they had set up their booths that they're selling the merch from, right? And I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but you enter the show from the audience, and we do something called green eyes, right? So we're crawling around. So we have to enter through the house, and we're going through the house, and here's this merch thing, and we're checking out the merch, and there's Todd, behind the thing. And he's saying to all of us, and we're all in our makeup and our wigs and our hair, so you can't really, he's like, which one are you? Which one are you? Which one are you? Which one are you? And when I pointed to my picture, he yelled across the lobby, hey, Kevin, this is the one, pointing at me. So I didn't exactly know what that meant, and I don't remember when I found out what that meant, but I remember clearly that moment happening. And I was like, oh, somebody pointed me out.
That is hilarious. Yeah, because with Green Eyes, you do start all over the place because you kind of like, that's the thing. I think they're slowly bringing it back. They kind of paused it for COVID. But yeah, you kind of went out and you all are selling merch, and this is kind of your break, right? Because there's nobody in that moment they're ready to buy because they're already ready to see the beginning of the show.
Well, it was dress rehearsal.
Full on call. Oh, this was a dress rehearsal.
It was dress rehearsal.
So this wasn't the show. Okay.
So there's no audience.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, so when you're looking at the inserts, you're looking at like almost the headshots, like
absolutely the headshots
performer, not like the cat. So you have no idea which is
I don't know who is who or what cat is what. At that point, I don't know much about the show at all.
Okay.
I just pick a headshot out and say, oh, that's a cute girl. I'd like to, marry that.
That's who you want to meet. And then did you think at all, like you're ignoring the name next to it? It's like, who's Syllabub?
I wouldn't have known who Syllabub was at that point. Yeah. Now I came to learn the show quite well because the more I became, actually I say chase Leslie for the next 6 months. I spent a lot of time backstage for two reasons. One, I was trailing the stage managers because I wanted to go back to New York and work on the show. But I was also spending every spare moment I could watching Leslie on stage. So it was a lot of time backstage learning the show and watching her perform and everybody else perform, of course. Mm-hmm. It was a great company. I have to say that, over the course of my career and Leslie's career, we get to do a lot of shows. And I've done, probably a couple hundred, maybe 125, 150 theatrical shows where I've been involved in them. And this particular company is one of those special 7 or 8 shows that you remember and go back to and say, boy, it was just an amazing company. Because that doesn't happen all the time. It's like, going in your job life, your work to work. Sometimes you just have great people around you. And that company, 4, was just a remarkable group of people. And just a great experience. We're still friends with, 6 or 7 people from that company 30 years later. And close friends,
So, Leslie, when was the moment that you realized that this is your guy? Was there a moment on stage and tour, or was it off stage? Like, when did you kind of realize? He's obviously picked you out. He's known from day one.
Well, see, the problem was I had a boyfriend.
Details.
Minor challenge.
Details.
I resisted and we hung out a little bit in groups and we did some things, but there was one day that where were we? El Paso?
El Paso, yeah.
Yeah, El Paso, Texas. And we had kind of made plans with trying to get a group to do something on a day off, and nobody showed up but us. So we were by ourselves for that day, and it just got super romantic. And then finally he kissed me, and then that was it. I was done for.
Yeah. Kevin, was this coordinated? Did everyone not show up because you kind of told everyone not?
I'd like to say I was that clever. I was not. No. It was a water park. We went to a water park in El Paso. So
in El Paso, Texas. Okay. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the learning of the show, and then also from 2 different perspectives, because you get to go through the whole rehearsal process and kind of learn the backstory and everything. For you as Syllabub, and then Kevin, you get to go through this kind of as the wanting to learn it as a stage manager perspective and kind of almost a different viewpoint of the show. So I want to hear both kind of angles of what was that like. You now have to learn the show in great detail versus seeing it in Chicago or seeing it, in LA and just watching as a spectator. You're now needing to know everything. So what was that kind of first introduction to the plot and the story like? And then what was the surprising moments for you on that?
Unless you want to go first.
Well, I think for me, so in rehearsal, David Taylor, who, mounted our show, it was kind of like story time. He sat down and he told us the story of cats. I'm sure you've heard that from other people before. But for me, I was like, oh, 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 that's what that means. Oh, that's what happened. Oh, that's what, because literally I got none of the story when I saw the show, and I certainly didn't remember it. But he was intent on us creating relationships, and we did lots of improv within the story that he gave us. And, you guys are kittens, and these are the grown-up cats, and you interact with the kittens, but you respect the grown-up cats, and you get reprimanded by the grown-up cats. And we created so much backstory and relationship stories that carried us through the show and were very real to us every night within our interactions on the stage. But interestingly, when I saw our company out, in the audience, because they swing you out so your understudy can go on and get a rehearsal. And I watched the show and I was like, oh my God, the audience isn't getting any of that. We have this rich background going on, backstory, and the audience isn't getting any of it.
There's a great story that I think that I always tell from this, because I was out in the house initially. You learn what the show is, and we know all this stuff, and you have no idea if you've never done the show. And one night I was standing at my booth and I watched a guy explaining the show to his girlfriend. They were about 10 feet away, and I heard the whole conversation. And he was saying how, okay, so when that one cat falls off the boat, Jelly Lauren, when she falls off, or not Jelly, who is it, Les, that falls off the boat? The opera cat.
That is Jelly Lauren.
Jelly. When she falls off the boat, later on she washes up the beach and she's all messed up, and that's Grisabella now. And now she comes back, and and he catches my eye. His girlfriend is back to me. He catches my eye, and I went, And he goes, "That's not it." And I go, "No, it's not what's going on." But the audience they made up their own great stories, and it's hysterical to hear what they would say. And they would explain it to their kids and say, "Oh, and this is what's happening." They had their own whole narrative of what that show was.
Yeah.
It's an interesting part of it, because I've kind of, in the beginning, as I learned more about it, I saw it 2016 for the first time, had never seen it, never knew much about it, knew memory, but didn't know the whole thing. And I kind of had that same reaction of like, what did I just watch? I'm not a dancer. I'm not a singer. It's like, I was definitely mesmerized by the talent level of like, to do this. But I wasn't sitting there going like, oh my God, I know exactly how difficult that turn is. I'm sitting there going like, that just is something, I couldn't do any of it. So, but it is I love sitcoms and story arcs and writing and this kind of piece. And I did not get that in the show. And it was like almost bothered me. But then I'm kind of walking out and you're seeing all these children there. And as I've learned the show, I've learned more about the story of the show. It's really dark in some cases. Like there's a lot of darkness to it. And so I kind of really love hearing like everyone can take a very different kind of version of the same, at least loose arc that kind of falls all the way through. I mean, granted, that guy was just flat out wrong, but I kind of love hearing maybe there's some.
It was very clever though.
Yeah, maybe there's something there. Can
I just interject?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that people actually took the time to try to figure out a story, because when I saw it, I just was so mesmerized that I didn't even try to figure out a story. In my mind,
Completely.
It was just a dance concert, but we heard different things all the time. I remember one person said that old Deuteronomy and Grisabella got married at the end. And that's why she walked through the processional at the end, and then they go up, and that's them getting married. So
I like that. That'd be a kind of unique way to end the show. It's a little less dark than murdering a cat.
Exactly.
It is. It's interesting to hear you say that, because when you go to see a show like this, it's been going on for 40 plus years. Like it's been around forever. There's so many people that get exposed to it, and there are a lot of people that hate it, and nobody who hates it has ever been able to articulate why, which I found really interesting. Is I've yet to find an articulate reason why somebody doesn't really like it. But everyone watches from a different lens. I watch from someone who did not know dancing and singing in a lot of musical theater. I was mesmerized by the stage and the whole the built junkyard. I thought was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And then I was trying the whole time to figure out what the story was. Like, what is the arc? What's the relationship? What's that there? And there's too much going on to do that in the first time you see it. And in general, it's like half of them you don't know which name this person is. You can't pick this one out from a line. they're running around, they're dancing and jumping. But there is all that filling in the blank. But then you get to go and have this behind the scenes of like, you get told that story. You get to make those relationships. You get to have that. And that's what the fans kind of have this like really fun piece of, is that some of the super fans and the now current internet like has all kinds of theories about these two should be together based on what somebody did in this particular production at this particular time. And I think that's what makes this show very unique and interesting, is a world was built. So I want to ask you, because so Kevin, as the outside, you probably didn't get to sit through that story time.
No, I did.
You are now.
I got it later, and I'm sure somebody has told you this after 140 interviews you said you've done.
Yeah.
It's an RSC production. It's a Royal Shakespeare Company. It's Trevor Nunn who did it originally. And their process is to spend, a week or more just doing improvisational exercises when they start with a new company. They do improvisational actor exercises, and they work for a week. And I know this because I did, right after this, I went into Les Miserables. And Les Miserables, also Trevor Nunn and John Caird. And our first week of rehearsal, it's a luxury that you wouldn't have these days, was purely 6 days of putting the actors through their paces, doing exercises, trying different things out, experimenting, nothing to do with the show. Literally just getting the actors to this, what Trevor would call this RSC place, this place you could work from. And Cats came from that. Cats was that same kind of thing. Now, by the time Leslie did the fourth company, I don't know if you guys didn't get a full week of that, but you had a couple days of it, right?
Yeah.
Yes? You had
definitely.
a couple days. Yeah.
We did improv. I feel like we were improvising as Cats, like the first 3 days, but maybe not for the whole day.
Yeah. But my immersion into the show was kind of bizarre. I knew I was going into I left the company and I went into Chess as a production assistant. And I left Chess and I went to Les Mis to do the LA company as a production assistant. And while I was there, I knew I was going back to New York, and I was going to be a substitute stage manager on Broadway. And so I was making my prompt script. And the prompt script is what the stage manager calls the show from. So it's all the cues and all the music and all the stuff. But with Cats, unlike a lot of theatrical shows, Cats is all done by numbers. There wasn't any music in the script. It's all counts. So like every song is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it would say oboes or dancer or this or that. They give you little key marks. So I typed this before we had computers. I typed the entire script over and put all my cues into it, and I was learning the show by creating my prompt script from scratch. I had a Broadway copy, and I was using that to make my own. So that was when I had time off during Les Mis, I would work on my Cat script. And that was my introduction to the show, was this just full immersion into typing the script word by word by word and learning what I was paying attention to and asking questions. Because fortunately, on my Les Mis company, I was with Scott Ferris, who was the production stage manager. Scott's another one you should talk to. Scott was, I think, the original PSM for the LA company at Cats. And he was also, he didn't dance in Cats, did he? He was also a dancer in Cats, I think.
I don't know if he was our PSM too.
Yes, and then he opened our company for too. Anyway, Scott's a great guy. He's one of the great Broadway PSMs and directors. So
yeah. So when you're doing that and you're making your prompt script and this is almost literal of like, here's when someone comes on here, there. How much did you think at all about all the other pieces of this? Of like, well, those two are staged over there, and maybe they're dating, type of like cat wise, like because that's what the fans are doing, is like trying to piece together these relationships in this family. And I'm sitting there looking at this, thinking about a prompt script, going like, you probably are ignoring the twins besides when they're coming out, right?
Yeah, I have to say that my interest in musical theater, I grew up in it, but my interest in it was always the technical side of it. I loved so Cats to me. At that stage in my career and my age and my maturity level, I could have cared less. To me, it was just, I knew it was a John Napier set. I knew that the license plate on the car was the number of the set. It was like, set Napier 4, whatever it was. And I knew technically it was, one of the most advanced shows on Broadway at that moment. So everything for me was about the automation and about what the show was, how it was being lit and how it was being done, and the rake stage and the, all that stuff. That was what interested me at that point. It wasn't until later as I started doing other shows, that I started to get more information from Leslie and friends and started to learn more about the show. Because by the time I hit the Broadway company, it had been at Broadway for like 7 years. You don't see half the company. It's like, it's like going to work. You walk in, you punch the clock. Essentially, you go in, you do your thing, you go up, you call the show, and you go home, and you don't see half the people in the show. I mean, it's just a machine at that point. So there wasn't a lot of in-depth, this is what the show's about. And no, so I didn't get that opportunity.
Yeah, it's a different relationship too, doing that, because you're calling the show versus like they always talk about how the character, like the actors become like family. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're crawling around on each other for 8 nights a week. Like, you kind of have to get close to each other. If not, it's going to be a tough. You can't just come in, punch out. Like, you've got to do this physically demanding show that has a high injury rate and is extremely sexual and it's sensual in its own way. So it's cool to hear the other side of that, because I've mostly talked to performers.
Yeah, of course.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. So I want to hear a little bit about the tour. I think one of my favorite things is to hear the funny stories, because it seems like tour is crazy. So what do you remember? What stands out as like funny situations, funny memories, stuff that happened on stage that that you'll never forget?
Oh my gosh. I can't. So I did the show a second time. I went out 6 years later as a swing and covered 5 different parts. And, man, I can't think of any like really good stories. Like, nobody fell off the stage, which I've had happen in other shows.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
can you think of anything, honey?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. And again, this is from the technical standpoint, but we were on the tour early on in the run, and on the tour, it's obviously not the big automated stage. It's a thing that comes down for Isabella, the ring that comes down for Isabella, and it came down and it got stuck there and it would not go back up. So they had to stop the show. And and there's no curtain on Cats, so you can't hide anything. Everything that you're doing on stage, the audience is sitting there watching you. So the stagehands are going out there trying to get this thing to go out. At one point, somebody suggested, well, let's just cut it, and somebody else said that's not a great idea because we've got another show tomorrow night, and then we'd be screwed. And so those kind of things happen all the time. My favorite was on Broadway. We were doing a matinee show, and the whole back wall comes down, which is the ship, right? So the back wall comes down, and then at the end of the number, you call the cue, and the ship goes back out, and Skimbleshanks comes on next. And the ship didn't go out; it's stuck. So the entire stage is stuck, and so we stopped the show. And we spent about 15 minutes trying to figure out, the crew is trying to figure out the automation. They can't get it to work. It's not going to go. It's not going to open. It's going to be 3 hours. And the audience is sitting there. So we skip, I think, 5 numbers. And we go to the end of the show with the ship on stage. We skip to the end of the show, and we go right into memory. And Deuteronomy leads Grisabella up onto the ship. And they sing the number and they do the thing, and then he walks her down the ship and he walks her off stage right, and that's the end of the show. I think they returned 3 tickets. Like 3 people were like, well, hey, we did 5 songs out of the show. The rest of the audience like, oh, we had no idea. Yeah.
That one guy probably felt so vindicated that was his story. That night was his version of Cats. He got to see Jelly fall off the ship.
That's right.
And then Grisabella come back on the ship.
You're absolutely right. I never even put that together, but you're absolutely right.
This guy's somewhere. He's sitting there going like, I told you, I was right. For one night, he was definitely right. So it seems like, this is live theater. You get that. I've kind of always joked that when Grisabella's way up does not happen, which it does. It feels like every tour I talk to has had at least one night where she doesn't get to ascend. I was like, why can't she just walk to the Heaviside later that night? Like, why do you got to fix it? Just let her walk off. And most people aren't going to know the difference.
Well, it's so funny because all of those, the British shows that were happening, the only big shows that were really happening in the, for the most part, in the 80s, and they all had their thing. Les Mis had the barricades, and Cats had the tire and the ship, and, Phantom had the chandelier, and, so these shows got to be known for their set bit. So it was always there, and there was always, you were paying the price for it, because they were applying 20-year-old industrial technology to run these automation systems, because there was nothing back in that time. Nothing really existed. They were literally like repurposing industrial automation systems and putting them on there so to program these queues and make all this stuff happen all the time. And it was glitchy, and it didn't always go perfect.
Yeah. How difficult is that when you're doing it in different places every week? Like, when you're on tour, you don't have the same, like on Broadway, it's a little easier. You got the same house, same type of thing. So like when stuff goes wrong, you at least have an opportunity to fix it. Whereas if you're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, something goes wrong, and then 2 days later you're driving to, somewhere else in Texas, you've got to restart from scratch.
Well, the beauty of those tours and the way they were designed, and the genius behind which really again grew out of the 70s and the 80s as these shows became more technical, is they created these amazing. They were self-contained. We could roll our 5 trucks into a gymnasium, and if we had to, we could do the show. We could figure out the show. We didn't need a theater. You need something to hang on, but for the most part, you had everything you needed. You were like a little self-contained military operation. You rolled into town. You had tools. You had talented people. You had everybody knew their job. And it was designed to be exactly what that was. Like, we're going to be in a different situation. Sometimes on one part of our tour, we did 3 cities a week for a short amount of time. So we were, constantly moving that show, or they were constantly moving that show, and it just becomes part of what that's what they're designed to do. It's a money making thing, and it's got to work. It's got to work right, and it's got to open up at 8:00 every Tuesday night, no matter where you are. As far as the performer's concerned, Leslie, you had your own issues to deal with, touring in different locations and different climates and, different allergies and, all that stuff happens. Because you might be in Buffalo, New York, and then the next day you're in, Nashville. So 2 wildly different environments, as a vocal person or a dancer, there's all different kinds of stuff they had to deal with. And finding food, right? Being able to eat before the show, eat after the show.
Yeah, Leslie, what was that like for you? It's so interesting, because I always think about like, I relate so much to sports, and there's usually the Denver basketball, like you end up in altitude, and the one game there, the home team has a huge advantage because they're used to it and you're not. And there is that. I didn't even think about allergies and the singing.
It's the same thing. It's athletes moving from environment to environment. It's the exact same analogy.
Yeah.
Les?
I just loved it because I hadn't seen a lot of our country, really. I'd seen the few places I'd lived, and that was it. And, every theater was different. Every backstage was different. Every dressing room was different. And yet there was our box, that had our personal things in it that made our dressing area for every show. And finding your way to the stage sometimes was so confusing. And you'd come off stage and you'd be remembering the theater that you were in before that, and heading to the dressing room and going, oh no, my dressing room's on the other side of where I enter this time. So sometimes that was confusing. And, seeing the difference between brand new facilities and then beautiful old like Fox theaters and that are ornate, have just incredible personalities on their own. I just loved every second of that. But yeah, I'm one of those people who has dust allergies. So the brand new theaters were much better for me as far as singing was concerned, compared to the older theaters with a lot of dust and heavy draping and, all of that. But I mean, it was just so much fun for me. I was 26 years old when the tour started. It just was fun to see all the different cities and, get paid to do that show and then have my days free to go and sightsee in the city. And it was just a great time. And like Kevin said earlier, the group of people made it amazing, because not just the cast either, the band that toured with us and the crew, we were all tight. We were all friends. We all hung out. And
you married one of them.
Right.
I always love asking, and this is a dangerous question because you don't want to offend an entire population of people, but what was the city you loved, and then what was the one that you were just like, I'm okay if we leave this city quickly?
Oh, we got to be careful. I have to be careful.
Yeah. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm from a city that sometimes people say that, but I love where I grew up.
Well, I can say I'll say one city that, and it wasn't the city, because you have to remember that for us on a bus and truck tour, that with that much movement, it's not so much about the city; it's about the theater.
Yeah.
And it could be simple things like how good was the hotel, how close was the hotel, how good are the food options, how close are the food options, and the theater itself. And we actually played. God, was it Rockford, Les? We played a theater that we actually ended up, it became not a viable theater after we were there because the tour complained to Equity because there were leaks. It was just not in a state that should have had a national tour playing in it or a bus and truck tour. And we actually, that theater stopped being a performing arts center after we left. I mean, at least for union tours, they couldn't play.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a great one. But there were, all the cities had their
What about
thing.
favorite? What was one that you're like, absolutely love this city?
You know what mine was?
What's yours?
What?
Don't hate me. It was New Orleans because I'd never been there before. And it was so much, culture, and it was so different than anything I experienced before. And, but it wasn't a very safe city. So one of our Grisabella actually got attacked on the street there.
She got mugged. Remember, her whole side of her face was swollen.
Oh, wow.
Got mugged and her face slammed into, I think she broke her cheekbone. And you want to tell your story, honey? Or?
Well, how much time do we have? I don't want to.
We're good.
Well, so we're in New Orleans. I'll try to tell the story very quickly. Everybody's heard it who knows me. We're in New Orleans. Remember, I'm selling merchandise at that point. And come to find out, we should have done some things that we didn't do, like we should have paid off the local people. And we didn't. And that was just a thing that you did, but we didn't know any better, and we didn't do it. So at the end of the week, the Saints were on there. They were a contender for the Super Bowl. So it was in the playoffs, and the game was playing that day, and we were doing a matinee, and we were getting ready for loadout. So outside of the theater, we had paid parking for all of the Cats trucks. And of course, it's 5 Cats trucks that are all painted cats, and then the merchandise truck, which is not painted cats. It's just a rider truck. And my guys are in the truck, and we're loading some stuff out. One of the policemen who was paid by the show comes up and tells us that we have to move the truck. And I had been in a motorcycle accident about 6 weeks before, so I was on crutches at this point. And I'm up in the truck, and I said, "Give us 5 minutes, and we'll move the truck." Remembering, of course, that we're in a paid spot. We're allowed to be there. Mm-hmm. So he goes away. He comes back, and he says, "You got to move it now." And I say, "Call your tow truck. We'll be gone by the time it gets here." So not the right answer.
Yeah.
So I get out of the truck and I go inside the theater, and I'm in the theater for about 10 minutes. And as I come back out, there's now 5 policemen lined up against the back of the truck yelling at my 2 assistants, up in the back of the truck. And, they're yelling things and threatening things. And I come out of the theater, and the police see me, and the other guy goes, "There's the one, that's the one." And they point at me, and they walk over to me, and I put my arm up, and I point, and I say, "They're trying to get out of the truck. If you let them down, they'll move the truck." At that point, they handcuff me, and the other cops come up, and they encircle me, and they start taking me across the street. I have my backpack on me, and in my backpack at that point, I've got $75,000 cash from merchandise.
Wow.
Just a little red vinyl backpack, or a nylon backpack. Fortunately, before they cuff my other hand, I'm able to swing it off my shoulder, and I toss it to Todd, because I think I don't want to go to New Orleans jail with $75,000 cash on me. So they take me across the street. I'll try to fast forward through this. They do various things to me that aren't appropriate. Intermission comes up, or the end of intermission, and all the Cats are now at the stage door, because the stage manager of the show comes out and tries to intervene. And they say to him, "If you come any further, we'll arrest you too." So he stops. So all the Cats at intermission are coming out to the stage door to find out what's going on. Leslie's the last one to the door and walks up, and what does Chuck Lubeck say to you?
Well, I'm the last one of the last people off stage. So we've just done the big Jellicle Ball, and everybody exits, but Syllabub and Grisabella. Like, Syllabub has this moment where she almost touches Grisabella, and then she gets scared and runs away, right?
Yeah.
So everybody else has already exited, and they're crowding around this door. And I, walk over when I exit, and I say to Chuck, who was our dance captain, what's everybody looking at? And he turned to me and he says, your boyfriend's getting arrested. And I laughed. I was like, no, really, what is everybody looking at? And he's like, your boyfriend is getting arrested. And I looked out the door, and sure enough, there he was, like in this center area with a cop car on each side of him. They literally surrounded him with cop cars, and he's against the car.
They were parked across the street in the median, and they had their cars there, and they had little table TV tray set up, and they were watching the football game on like radio TVs. So they were just hanging out because they were there for our security, and they take me over. They take me over to that location and put me on the car, and with my hands behind me, and proceed to charge me. I know.
And I literally thought, what could he have done? And then he sassed. He mouthed off to somebody. That's what he would have been arrested for. And sure enough, that was it.
So anyway, I did try to get through it fast. They took me in to the parish county prison. And I was in there for like 4 hours, which was a whole nother story and terrifying. And they told me eventually Todd came to get me out and paid my bail. And they charged me with 3 things, so they were able to charge for a lot of bail. I had on me, in my pocket, I had about $900 cash. They charged me like $1,050 in bail. So they purposely put 3 charges on me so that I couldn't bail myself out. And eventually my associate came and bailed me out. And they said, if you go back to the theater, you'll be arrested. So I happened to be staying at a place called the Olivier House. And it was a family-owned hotel, still is to this day. As a matter of fact, one of the girls in our show from that tour married into the family. She runs the hotel with her husband.
Wow.
30 years later. They got me a lawyer, and that was a whole kind of farce in itself, and went to court the next morning. The whole company left. They loaded up the trucks, packed it up. They left town. I'm in town by myself now. I go to court. The lawyer holds up a piece of paper. He walks me into the room, and the whole room is crowded. All the people I was in jail with the night before up in the front in the holding areas getting ready to be tried. It's 6 a.m., I think, or 6:30 a.m., and he holds up a piece of paper from the back of the room in front of like 150 people and says, hey, Joe, he's talking to the judge. He said, can we take care of this? And Joe, the judge, says, yeah, come on back. So the entire room turns around and looks at me like, who the hell am I? They go in a back room. They're back there like 5 minutes. They come back out, and he's holding a piece of paper, and he says, I got you. And he comes out, and it says, it's a form letter. And it says, I blank agree not to sue the parish police department for da-da-da-da-da, I blank, and we'll do this. And so all I had to do is fill in my name in this badly crooked mimeographed thing. It said, I agree not to sue. And I was off and done, and I quickly went to the airport and went off. I ended up going back to New Orleans a couple more times with other tours. Same cops were there that didn't recognize me. They were nothing but respectful and nice. But when I came back as a stage manager, not as a merch guy. So I had a different relationship with him at that point. So anyway, sorry, that was a long story.
I feel like I've heard it all, and every time I'm like, nope, there's more to all these stories. Here's my one question: Were the Saints losing?
They no, they were winning. They were.
Oh, okay.
This was 1987. So if you look, it's like fall of 87, right? Yeah, fall of 87. I think they were. I don't think they won the Super Bowl that year, but I know they were on their way. I was in when I went to jail, when they took me in, I was in jail with mostly people they had picked up at the game.
Yeah.
So it was all kinds of, different kind of people. I was in this big holding cell that was terrifying. And I'm just sitting in the corner, this, 24-year-old, long-haired, kid sitting in the corner with all these, hardened criminals. They threw.
You can just see you with a Cats sweatshirt on in there too, like the merch. You got the merch on, and you're sitting in there with a bunch of these Saints fans.
Oh yeah, it was fun. Anyway, yeah. So, but I like New Orleans. I mean, it's it's an amazing city. So.
yeah. I mean, I don't even know. That's with a wild story. I always feel like I've heard it all. That is not one I was expecting to hear. So cool to hear a different perspective. Terrible situation. I'm glad that you didn't. One of the things that came to my head is like, God, if you would have had that backpack with you would have been charged with like 800 things. So your bail would have been $80,000 instead of $1,000. Yeah, that is a crazy story.
It's fun.
Well, let's move to a couple rapid fire from the show, and I think this will be fun because Kevin, for you, I know you usually ask like you've done it, but you haven't actually done the show. You've done the show in different ways, but you've never actually danced the show.
I have not danced the
I'm
show.
I'm gonna start with which cat, if you could go on for both of you for one night, and forget if it's male female vocal range, you could do it, sing it, dance it. If you could just go on for one night, who would you want to perform as?
Well, I actually got to do it, and it was bomb ballerina, and I would never pass as bomb ballerina because I'm only 5'2.5", but I got to do it as a swing one time because I was literally the last swing they would ever put on for that part.
Yeah.
But it was so fun. So
yeah.
Yeah. She dances the whole show, and she's got the big, sexy number, and yeah, I loved it.
Nice. Who are you going on as?
Oh, me? Oh, it's got to be Tugger.
Yeah.
Tugger's the that's the fun one. It's either that one or what was Dan's part, honey? I always liked him too.
Monkastrap.
Monkastrap or Tugger would be my two choices.
Okay. Who are your favorite and least favorite cats? And I'm saying forget the people who played them, just purely personality wise of the cats.
I think I love Rumpelteazer. And I think maybe my least favorite would be McCavity.
The villain.
Yeah, the villain.
Okay.
Yeah, you got to go with McCavity. You got to go. It's because everybody, otherwise everybody is charming and fun and just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
And McCavity, of course, is the bad guy, the one who's messing it all up.
What about favorite?
Well, again, I love Monkastrap and Tugger. The ones I would go on are two of my favorites. Yeah, they're just fun. I mean, a good Tugger can just make that show. Mm-hmm. It just really makes that show great, and a good Monkastrap too can just it's just as that, especially if they have a great stage presence and they're just and Dan, our guy, was so good at it.
I think a close second to Rumpelteazer for me would be Skimbleshanks. Because he's just so fun and loving like an old uncle,
Mm-hmm.
And now, it's interesting because I do think my perspective is from Syllabub, right?
Yeah.
It's like my likes, because I really loved watching, Skimbleshanks every night and being part of that. And it was so playful. And then same with Rumpelteazer. She was always so fun. That character was so fun to be on stage with because she's a little bit mischievous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting into trouble and making us laugh. And so
it's really interesting as I ask these same questions to everybody who I've interviewed. It does seem like a lot of people are skewed by who they performed as, because you spend so much time in that mindset that no matter what, you've got to it's still part of it, and it's part of the way you've kind of thought of the show at all times. So it's fun with swings because then you've had to embrace so many different characters that sometimes you get a little different answers, but yeah, it's a piece of how you view the whole production. And I think it makes it kind of fun to get these answers because of that. Favorite song on the show?
Well, for me, it's the ball, which technically is not a song; it's a piece. But I love the Jellicle Ball.
Any musical part, yeah. So I count that.
Yeah, I love the Jellicle Ball. For me, it was so much that was fun to call. And it was the show. It was the one that I always made time to go back and watch Leslie in. I would go backstage, and I was always downstage left because I had the best view of her. And she actually had a part in the choreography where she went from upstage right to downstage left, and she ran at me. So I'd always get a little bit of a hello, and but I just love that. I just love that musically, and it was really fun to call. As a stage manager, that was a really great number to call.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the overture.
Yeah.
Because it was just so incredibly exciting to hear it and listen to it. And you really did, you're out there in pitch black, right? You're in the dark. You're just listening to this music, and a little bit of lights are going on the stage before the green ice, and it's just, it's orchestrated so well.
Yeah, it's kind of iconic. Once you know it, the minute you hear that, you're like, oh, it kind of almost hypes you up. It's the beginning, you're ready to go. And someone actually just told me that you should put it as run music. If you're running, it's really good for running. I was like, oh, that's spot on.
Wow, I never thought of that, but yeah, seemed like it'd be good.
Yeah. All right, I always ask one fun one, and my fun one is, as a stage manager, which cat do you think would make the best stage manager?
Monkeystrap, for sure. Monkeystrap.
What do you think, Leslie?
Les, what about you?
Who I think would make the best stage manager?
What cat's the best stage manager?
Oh, let's see. I mean, definitely Monk, but
I can tell you the other one I thought of, because I did think Monkeystrap was my number one.
Well,
My number two is Skimbleshanks.
oh yeah,
He's gonna
absolutely.
keep everything
Yeah.
on time.
super
Absolutely.
organized.
He's
Yeah.
already got it all written out. He's got that whole thing numbered out for you already.
Yep.
But
Yep.
He's going to be
Monk
the
is
fun stage manager, and Monk's going to be the serious, dour
Yeah,
stage manager. Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's a good call. I didn't even think about that.
I've
Yep.
spent way too much time thinking about all these different things. 'Cause I like to. It's really fun to think about the cats in different scenarios because the personalities are so wide that
Who's
somebody
your
fits in
favorite?
most things. So I think it's interesting of depending on how you answer that question. It's almost become like a little bit of a psychology exam of who do you hate and least hate. Because I think it's sometimes of like, is it the personality that you're least like or most like? And so my favorite was the one that I'm probably least like, which is I really enjoyed the number, I thought Tuggers was great. Like just comes in and wrecks, and I'm way too Midwest to be that type of personality. So it's like, I really enjoyed that. But then I've come to love McCavity as the song, not the character. And so I love the bomb to meter whole dynamic of that. The first time I saw it, though, the only thing I remembered walking out of the stage was Mungo, Jerry, and Rumple Teaser the whole time, because they just sing it to you over and over and over and over again. Like you can't forget it. I also realized later it's one of the few times that it's only two cats on stage. Like most of the rest is like with a lot of cats on stage, and it can get overwhelming, especially for me, was trying to put the plot together. I'm like, what's going on here? I was like, with those two, I'm like, I know what's going on. I know what they're trying to do. I know the story they're telling. So I think I just got to enjoy it a little bit more. So those, I think, were the ones that I've loved the most. Dislike is not in your production, but there is a cat who plays, it's Gus's ensemble character, and his name was Peter. And I just don't like the idea that you've got Mr. Mistopheles and Joey Lorem and Bomb Ballerina, Rum Tum Tugger, and then you've got Peter. So it's always been my answer for my least favorite has been Peter. And I've made a lot of jokes about Peter. And Peter has like no story because Peter is just Bus Gus in the beginning of the revival version. And it's just a
I don't. We didn't do that in ours, right? That wasn't part of our camp. We didn't have a Peter.
No,
he was always Gus.
It was always sometimes it's like asparagus is the dance in the beginning. If it's not Gus, the one, so it's like, it's something different. But for some reason they decided to name, and it's in the naming of cats. So that's where the name came from. So I get why, but I'm like, why did they pick this name?
That's an odd choice. Yeah.
I have some Peter dislike there.
I think that's fair.
Okay. I gotta ask the $1 million question. So this is my whole podcast is predicated on the idea that I don't think Grisabella is the right Jokel choice. So I want you both to put on your old Deuteronomy hats, and I want you to tell me who you are picking if you're deciding and why. And then if you say Grisabella, I'm asking some follow-up questions to try to change your mind.
Wow.
I think I probably would have gone with Gus
Love it.
Tiger, because I love him. He's so sweet and he's so pathetic, kind of the way he sits there and he shakes a little bit at the end, and I think he would be another alternative.
They should go up together.
Gus and Gris together.
They should both go up together. They're both the older cats. They've had some hard knocks, and I don't know. So I would pick Gus as an alternate to Grizz, but I'd hate to leave Grizz behind because she's so bedraggled. Poor thing needs something better happen.
I think isn't getting to be reunited with your family something better?
But was it her family? I mean, they make it sound like it's her family, but it's they can't. It was the family that kicked her out, right?
That's what's the answer here? Like, what's the thought there? Because I do think like she seemed to have done some bad stuff and her family turned their back, and then there's now a welcoming her back. That's the way I interpret it. But you're saying this wasn't even her family, or she's over her family because they
Les, you know that part better than I do. I always got the impression she wasn't necessarily from this group. That she.
Oh no, I think she was one.
But she predates all. The kittens weren't alive. She's older. She comes from a different time. Right?
The kittens weren't alive necessarily, but the thing is that People think she's old and, bedraggled, but she's not old is the thing. She's not old. She just abused herself so much. She's partied
So
hard.
she's not the mom of some of the kittens. She's older than that.
Oh, I never even thought about any of those cats as being our mothers or Grisabella being our mother. But I did feel that Grisabella is a contemporary of Bomb.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
And
completely.
Bomb is not old.
Yeah.
It's just that Grisabella is worn out. She's abused her body. She's abused herself so much. And I do think there's forgiveness and redemption. And I think that's a lot of what Deuteronomy was, trying to guide us toward. And that's the reason he makes that choice, or he makes the choice. But really, you feel like you've had a part in that all along when you're, a part of the group.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's there's enough of a story there. I get the redemption. I just have always kind of felt that if she's being redeemed, let her go next year. Let Gus go this year. Let her spend a year with the family. Let her have her reunion. There's that heartfelt moment of being reaccepted. And it's great. You're being they're welcoming you back into this tribe that, abandoned you and treated you poorly in the first act. And then it's great. And then now we're going to murder you. We're going to send you up. We're going to get rid of you. And so I think that's the part that I've always struggled with. I also saw a lot of more younger Grisabellas because, on the most recent tours, you get a younger casted Grizz. And so I'm they're not the Gus age old, ready to go. They're too young to go. But okay, so Kevin, you picked two. I do keep track. So who are you putting down? Am I putting down Gus or I'm putting down Grizz?
Oh, I think Grizz. I think she's. I think
okay.
I treat Grizz like she's a heroin addict and she's at the end of her life and she's got the peace. She's been redeemed and now the best thing for her is just to move on. It's time.
No rehab.
No
jellicle rehab.
No,
she's gonna go.
She's just too far gone.
Misery.
She's so downtrodden and if when it does what it's supposed to do. She has this joyous moment of, finally she's going to be at peace. She's going to be at peace.
When the set works like you want it to. Right? It's such a stage manager answer there. When it does what it's supposed to. I love it. When she doesn't have to go out in the boat, we're good.
Exactly. But
she might not make it another year.
Yeah.
Right.
She's probably not going to make it another year.
But is Gus going to make another
probably
year?
going to hang on.
I don't know. Gus's story seems like he's out.
The thing you don't know is Gus goes the next night. We just don't get to see it.
Yeah. Gus doesn't get the fanfare. He just goes. I've had some interesting conversations of it does say every year, but what's a year in the cat's world? Is it?
Oh, that's a good point.
Calendar year? Is it? There's a lot that you can. That's very unanswered if you really, really dig deep into this, which we won't go any further. But I really appreciate y'all coming on. I know, Kevin, you're still doing stuff in theaters, so tell us a little bit about your company.
Sonova's we're a top-down production house. We do broadcast, we do theater, we do live corporate, we do. We also have a division that's the architectural side where we do permanent installations. So. I told you earlier, we did YouTube's 3 buildings, building 1, 2, and 3, Mountain View. Mm-hmm. We did Hudson Yards we were at for a few years, Hard Rocks in a couple different locations, Facebook's all over the world. So a lot of big technology centers. And then on Broadway, we're represented by American Idiot and, gosh, I'm going to completely blank on every single one of the shows. Go to the website, Sonova.com. Senova.com. But we're in that space, and then we're about 70% of the one-off award shows. So we do the Oscars and the Emmys and Kennedy Center Honors and Golden Globes and BET and a lot of those kind of shows. That's our big broadcast space. So
wow.
It was kind of a continuation of where I started in, and we do theater because I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company, and we do theater because I still like it. So
yeah. One day you're going to do more cats. I hope.
I don't know about that.
No more.
I don't know. Maybe I would never say never.
Never say never. I love it. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you both for coming on, sharing, and telling some stories and getting some new theories out there. It's always fun.
Well, thank you very much for having us. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks.
Who was really thinking about everything, right?
Oh yeah, has anybody sung a song for you on the of your 140 interviews? Has anybody?
We've had some like little pieces of it. Yeah, do you want to add a couple bars in here now? Like,
that was it. All you got was that.
That's all I get. Just a little bit of memory.
I could do my little Cats choreography.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. So thank you, and thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other list of podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died, or check our website, thewrongcatdied.com.